It was all in place for Leo Munby. He had sold the company that he had built from the ground up for over $100 million. He had given 20 years to creating that company, and now he was going to enjoy the middle years of his life. The deal was signed. He had bid goodbye to all of his employees and returned home from the office for the last time. He exited the building through the servants' entrance as he often did. The feeling of walking under that sign always gave him a thrill. Of course, when asked about this practice, he would just claim that he was doing it to avoid being bothered on the way to his office. Now, he would never have to worry about that again. That was yesterday. Now, he was in his home and surveying the last piece of his domain. All that was left for him was to dismiss his long-time live maid. She had been in his employ for 10 years, and he was not happy to let her go, but she stood in his way. Leo knew that he could never live the life he wanted with her there. She would be too judgmental, and even perhaps let his secret slip if she ever found out. No, he was sure she had to be dismissed. He was determined to be in a house that usually would have no master and him as its housekeeper. He would only depart from his domestic role when company was over, when he would go back to pretending that he was comfortable being a wealthy man. While the wealth was comforting to him, the man part was always a source of displeasure. He had always felt the desire to dress as a woman, but the feelings of wanting to serve came to him later. As his privilege increased, so did his desire to cast them away. He believed that no one could understand why a rich man who could do whatever he wished would want to be a lowly domestic on her knees. Leo steeled himself for the uncomfortable words he would have to tell Maria. He took a deep breath and said, "Maria, can you come see me?" "In a moment, Leo," she answered. Maria always called Leo by his name because he insisted upon it. Leo was born into a middle-class family and often felt odd when she tried to call by his last name or sir. Leo wanted to be neither a sir nor a mister. While he gave her orders, Leo never acted as if she was beneath him. Leo believed it was a reason that she had stayed so long in his employ. As Maria took longer than expected, Leo braced himself on the wall. Finally, she emerged and approached Leo dressed in her usual dark gray uniform and white apron. Leo could not help but admire it. He would soon get one that matched it and would try to find a similar pair of white shoes and black tights that she was fond of wearing. "What do you need, Leo?" she asked. "Maria, could you sit for a moment?" Leo asked as he motioned to a chair in the den. Maria looked at him strangely and sat. It was his tone that struck her strangely. She was not unaccustomed to sitting in his den. She had sat beside him in the den many times since he insisted that she make herself at home in house when she was not on duty. It had crossed both of their minds that both seemed at times to be playing the non-sexual role of the spouse neither had ever had. Maria had listened to stories of his day, and he had listened to hers. She listened because he was her boss. He listened because he longed for the life of domestic help. However, those things were soon going to be in the past in Leo's mind. It made him sad, but he was determined to live the way he had dreamed for years. With a hint of sadness in his voice and unable to look her in the eyes, Leo said, "I'm going to have to let you go. I'm not cutting you loose up a creek. You can stay until you get another job, of course." "Oh, so you want to get to it?" Maria asked inquisitively. "I don't follow. Don't talk to me like I don't know what's going on, Leo." "What do you mean?" Leo asked, clearly taken back a little. "You want to clean this house yourself now that you have time." Leo started to reply, "Well, it's not that I want." "Yes, you do. You always have. I see the way you look at me while I clean. It's not me you're lusting at. It's the job and the uniform." Leo began to blush. He could not believe what he was hearing. She had known his secret. He wondered who else had figured it out, if anyone. Maria stared at her employer's flustered face with a mix of amusement and interest. Leo looked at the floor as he began to explain his plan. "I'm going to start cleaning this house." "In a uniform, I suppose," Maria interjected. Leo nodded slowly and avoided her eyes, fearing their judgment. Maria then added, "So where are you going to sleep?" "In my bedroom. Maids don't sleep in the master bedroom." "What kind of fantasy fulfillment is that?" "Of course you're right. I'm going to be staying in your quarters." "So you want to be like me?" "If I could be you for a day, it would make the happiest man in the world." "Well, you'll never be a girl, but maybe I can help you be a maid." "How's that?" Leo asked. "I can train you to take care of this house properly, or I could," Maria said before she trailed off. "You could what?" "Well, we could. The rental season has been slow this year, I'm sure you've heard." "Yes, I've heard that. Perhaps we could rent a home far from these walls where no one has ever seen Leo Munby." "You mean let's rent a house far away so that I can go out in public without being recognized?" "Exactly. You could get the real sense of servitude running errands as a maid for a while. Maybe if you make this little fantasy a reality, you can get it out of your system." "Well, yes, but I'm a guy." "The neighbors will know." "Yes, they will, but they'll probably conclude you're a transsexual." The idea of going out in public dressed as a woman made Leo's dick engorge with delight. The exciting embarrassment that it would surely give him would not be tempered by the fear of being exposed he got around his home. Leo smiled and finally got the courage to look Maria in the eye and said, "You would go with me to train me, I suppose?" "I could, but there would be lost wages involved for me." "How much?" Leo asked. "Well, standard rental this time of year runs 14 weeks. If I'm on your payroll, I'm losing 14 weeks of my part-time work. That comes out to about $182 a week. It's a low-wage job, so I'll be able to get another one when I get back, so I won't charge for those lost wages." "I'll pay that to you." "Fantastic, but there's something else we could do." "What?" Leo asked in a high tone, unable to conceal his excitement. "Well, I could play two roles." "Go on," Leo interjected. "I could be your maid trainer, but I could also play your employer." "My employer?" "Yes, I could show you the kind of treatment you never gave me, but I'm sure you crave." Leo could not help but reply, "That would be fantastic." "So we have a deal?" Maria asked. "Yes," Leo declared before silence fell between them as they realized that they had to get their affairs in order before this could go through. The silence broke as Leo spoke. "How did you know about me?" Leo asked. "I have to know." "It was something in the way you looked at the uniform, not what was beneath it, that made me realize that your desires were a little different from a normal man's." "It was how I looked at that, and also there was your peculiar desire to talk to me like I was just a regular person. You treat me almost like the way I've seen bosses treat their office staff. Hell, you treated me better. You've never even scolded me, and when I see you get mad, you seem to roar like a mouse, Leo. You've never made me call you all those fancy names that I know other maids have been forced to call their employers." "Well, I never thought you were beneath," Leo began to say before Maria interjected. "I know. That's what makes you so unusual in my business. You never thought I was beneath you, because you wanted to be just like me." "Exactly," Leo exclaimed. "Well, soon enough," Maria said before she stood. Once up upon her feet, Maria continued, "Well, let's get to it then." Leo scratched his neck and asked, "Where do you want to rent?" "West Egg." "All right, we can do that," Leo replied as he walked towards the computer, satisfied that the place she had chosen was sufficiently far away. He searched for rentals in the area and called Maria in to give her opinion on them. He told her she should make the call since she was going to be the master of the domain in which he would be just a lowly servant. Maria selected one of the rentals almost immediately. The princely sum for the large home included payments for maintenance and utilities. It had 5 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, and a maid's quarters. She seemed particularly sold based on the presence of those quarters, as she told Leo, "A maid's quarters is a must. We can't have you sleeping in a guest room." That's far too distinguished a place for the help. Leo wanted to scold her for saying something like that about him, but he decided to get used to playing the part of someone whose opinion mattered not. Leo kept his mouth shut, because it was to be his place and because being scolded made him excited. Leo looked up at Maria and saw that the dismissive words she said were calculated to produce the feelings that were now running inside of him. Maria went back to cleaning the home and Leo called the realtor renting the home. Leo was happy to hear it was still available and that they would be able to move into the home in 2.5 weeks. Leo offered her the money without ever checking the building out in person. She asked if he was serious. He responded he was and asked for the building to be rented in Maria's name. Leo told the realtor the check would be sent by overnight mail and asked where he could pick up the keys. She told him to go to her office a few miles from the rental, where she would be there to deliver them to him in person upon his arrival. Leo thanked her and hung up the phone. Leo told Maria he was leaving to send the check. She responded with a simple, unexcited okay. Leo returned home immediately upon sending the check. Maria left later that night for her second job at a restaurant and to put in her 2-week notice there. As the days went by before they were set to leave, Leo cleared up a number of potential issues for himself. He called all of his friends, family and associates that might seek him out during those 14 weeks he would be gone and told them that he would be unavailable for those weeks. He also set up a bank account for Maria to use while they were away. He put $80,000 in it for her to pay for food and supplies and to spoil herself the way a woman renting a home that grand should be able to. As the departure day grew closer, Leo grew ever more excited over his impending servitude. The more excited he got, the more desiring of realism he got. He went to the dentist and had his veneers removed, showing his naturally yellowed teeth. He shredded his credit cards and bank cards and got an account at a bank in West Egg. He set it up with the minimum amount needed to start an account. He then arranged for money to be sent from his checking account to his new account in West Egg, the equivalent of minimum wage for 48 hours a week of work. The prospect of having so limited funds at his immediate disposal excited Leo. The afternoon before they were set to leave, Leo noticed that Maria was already packed. He was interested to see why she did not wait to the last minute. When she came home that afternoon after running a few last-minute errands, she said to Leo, "Leo, I made arrangements for you to get fitted for some uniforms down at Claire's Uniform Depot. She doesn't know you, but she's open-minded." Leo froze. He was hoping to buy uniforms once he got to West Egg, not in the area where he lived. "Leo, I'll be going in with you. People will probably think you're getting me a new uniform. I'll even go in one of my uniforms to make that seem clear." Leo nodded slowly, and she smiled and said, "Let's go then." "Now?" Leo said after a stammer. "Yes, now," Maria answered with a smile. She rushed him to get his keys and gave him directions as he drove his BMW towards their destination. As Leo drove to the store, he was overcome by dread. This potential humiliation was taking place too close to his home. He wondered if he would see anyone he knew there. He hoped that the store's employees did not know anyone he did. Although Leo believed in his heart that he was born to be a maid, he feared the reactions of others to his desires to live as who he believed he was. He parked the car outside of the building and hastily followed her into it. He rushed in so as to avoid being seen clearly, but inadvertently drew more attention to himself in the act. They were greeted by a middle-aged woman dressed in an embroidered white blouse and black pants. She looked at Maria with a smile and asked, "This is the guy?" "Yes, it is." "Wonderful," she said as she raised her hand and beckoned them to follow her. She led them into the back room of the building away from where potential shoppers might see them. The woman took hold of a measuring tape and told Leo to stand straight up. Leo felt the tape being wrapped around his waist. He stood with his legs together to hide the erection that arose once he began thinking about what was going on. He was being measured, but not this time for a tailored suit. No, this time he was being measured for a maid's uniform. The clothes this woman was measuring for would not be designed to convey power and prestige, but servitude and lowliness. She wrote down Leo's measurements of his waist and hips and asked Maria, "Is he going to have breasts?" Leo blushed at the question about him that was being directed to someone else, though he was in both of their presences. Maria nodded and said, "He's going to have B-cup breasts. I picked up the forms today." Leo's eyes bugged out as he realized how realistic Maria seemed to be trying to make this for him. Maria looked at Leo as he stared at the floor as the woman took his chest measurement down and compensated for the future breasts. Maria, reading his face, asked, "Would you prefer breast implants?" Leo's head shot up and he stared at her and shook his head swiftly. Maria laughed and said, "That's what I thought." Leo breathed a sigh of relief that she was not planning on making him get the implants he secretly desired, but knew he could never have. The store clerk broke in and asked Maria to pick out the uniforms for Leo. Leo was excited to have no say in what he was to be wearing. It made him feel almost as if he had reverted to childhood and his mother was picking out his clothes again. Leo watched as Maria perused the store's inventory. Leo watched her with great interest and delight that was disguised by the apparent humiliation on his face. Maria selected 1 light blue, 1 pink, 1 black, and 3 dark gray maids' uniforms for Leo. She walked over to Leo with the uniforms in her hand. Leo caught a glimpse of one of the labels which read, "Housekeeping dress." The sight caused another embarrassing, public arousal. Leo was almost as excited over the clothes as he was that he was given no say in the matter. Leo watched as the uniforms that were soon to be his were placed on the counter. He then heard the woman say something to Maria, and they started towards the door. They then left Leo alone in the room to wonder what they were doing. Leo started towards the uniforms and read their labels. They were all labeled housekeeping dresses. They were 100% polyester. Leo could not remember the last piece of clothing he had made from that fabric. He was finally going to have clothing that seemed to fit who he was. Leo ached to wear them. He picked each one up and examined it as his small cock swelled with delight. 5 minutes later, Maria came back into the room carrying several pairs of opaque tights that were either black, white, or brown and 2 pairs of nude pantyhose. She also had several white aprons in her hands. She laid them down on the counter on top of the housekeeping dresses. The store clerk walked in behind her with shoe boxes in her hands. She placed the boxes on the counter and removed a pair from the first box. She placed them on a table and told Leo to take off his shoes. Leo complied and saw that the shoe she took in her hand that was the exact same one he saw Maria wear every day in his home. It was a real maid's shoe. He felt the need to have it. Leo stuck his foot in the soft, white shoe and laced it up. He was surprised how light and comfortable it felt. It felt right for him to wear it, so unlike all the days he had worn black dress shoes to the office. Maria asked, "Do they fit?" Leo nodded. Maria turned to the saleswoman and said, "We'll take 3 pairs." The saleswoman nodded, and Leo took the shoe off his foot. The woman took the shoe away and gave him another one. Leo took the hard black shoe in his hand. It had a slight heel on the back and was solid black in color. He looked at Maria, who answered his look with, "They're formal serving shoes. You'll be wearing them to serve me dinner." Leo nodded and slipped his feet into the lace-free shoe. Leo stood and noticed that the shoe fit. It was not as comfortable as the other shoe, but it was more presentable. He slipped the shoe back off and put his own one back on. Considering how he was dressed, the male shoe looked as if it belonged on his foot, but having felt the first soft white shoe on his foot, Leo believed at that moment that a man's shoe would never feel right on his foot again. It had a disappointing male feel to it. Leo swore at that moment that he would wear maid's shoes every moment he could. Leo did not hear what Maria said about the second pair of shoes, but the woman came out with 2 pairs of them. The woman rang up the various items Maria had picked out for Leo and looked at Leo to pay the bill. Leo squirmed in the woman's glance. Maria looked at him and said, "Get your credit card and pay the woman. We've got other stuff to do." Maria did not know that Leo had destroyed his credit cards earlier. The only thing that Leo had to pay for the outfits with was a debit card that had Maria's name upon it. It was supposed to be a surprise for her when they reached West Egg. Leo placed the card on the counter. The woman ran it through and stared at the name. She looked at Maria and asked for the PIN number. Maria was confused. She took a look at the card and glanced up at Leo. "I was going to surprise you when we got there with it," Leo said as he trailed off and looked at the ground. Maria smiled and asked, "What's the PIN?" "The year you started to work for me." Maria tossed her long brown hair and punched in the year. The purchase was cleared. Maria signed the receipt. She then looked at Leo and said, "Get those bags and meet me at the car." Leo did as he was ordered. He carried the bags to his car and placed them inside the trunk as Maria waited in the passenger seat. As Leo situated himself in the driver's seat, he asked, "So where do we have to go so urgently?" "I got you an appointment down at the hair salon on Shelley Street." "What?" "I can't go there," Leo shrieked. "You worry too much, Leo. I've got a special area outside of the public view set up for you so that you can get your extensions in private." "Extensions?" "Hair extensions. I want your hair longer, and this is pretty much the only way besides a wig, but those get too hot for the type of work you're going to be doing." Leo nodded his head as if he was certain she was right. He drove them towards the salon as Maria directed. Leo's mind raced as he awaited the humiliation that he was sure was waiting for him in the salon. Surely someone would recognize him and see what Maria was planning to do to him. Maria and Leo entered the hair salon as the evening rolled in. Leo looked around and happily noticed that there was no one he recognized in the building. They were immediately led to a back room away from the normal clientele. Leo was seated at a chair. He looked at himself in the mirror as beautiful. Young woman walked over and introduced herself. "Hello, I'm Christina. I'll be your beautician today." Leo smiled at her and moved his legs together since his presence in the beauty shop was enthralling to him. He was relieved to be able to move his legs apart as she placed a black cape around him to keep hair off his clothes. Christina asked, "So what are we doing today?" Maria answered for him, "He's getting extensions, and I'd like you to thin his eyebrows out a bit." Christina smiled at him slightly. Leo blushed and put his head down as he knew she realized her job was to make him appear more feminine. As Christina got to work attaching the extensions to Leo's slightly long hair, she asked with a grin, "Why do you want extensions?" Leo hemmed and hawed before Maria interjected, "Because he looks too manly." "That's a bit different," Christina replied with a grin. As she continued to attach the extensions, Christina asked, "So why don't you want to look manly?" Leo blushed. He briefly looked in the mirror and saw that Christina and Maria both seemed to relish his reaction. "Well, go on, Leo. Answer her," Maria declared. Leo said in a low voice, "I just don't." Christina's smile grew wider, and she continued on with her job. As she attached an extension, she asked, "So you're looking to look a little girlish?" Leo responded with silence. Leo saw Maria in the mirror. She was staring at him and waiting for an honest answer. Leo breathed hard and said, "Yes." While tapping him on the shoulder after he finished responding, Christina asked, "So do you want to look like a girl or a lady?" Leo, not knowing which he was supposed to look like, said, "A lady, I suppose." "A lady?" Maria hollered before she broke into laughter. Christina smiled at her and chuckled at her response. Christina asked Maria, "What's so funny?" "He's not going to look like a lady. He's going to be a maid." "Leo, darling, maids don't look like ladies." "A maid?" Christina declared, surprised. "Yes," Leo replied with a beet red face. "That's interesting. I don't mean that to be dismissive. You really do have the build for that type of work. It's just that, well, I guess you're really not." "Oh, never mind." Leo continued to blush and failed to respond to her rambling as she continued to attach extensions. As Leo watched the extensions falling to the side and back of his head, he became aroused. He watched each attachment intently as his look became more girlish by each attached strand. Christina saw it herself and said to Leo, "You're looking so much more girlish. Doesn't that just excite you?" Leo blushed. He did not respond, but Christina knew the answer was obviously yes. Christina eventually finished with the extensions and started on his eyebrows with wax. She put them on both eyebrows before she pulled either. Just before she pulled the first one off, she said, "Now, this may sting a bit." Leo winced as the pain of the ripped-away hair stung him. Christina smiled and said, "Man, girl, you've got to stop being such a sissy with pain if you want to look girlish." She then pulled the other strip off. Leo adjusted himself as Christina walked away for a moment. She returned and cleaned up his eyebrows and finished the job by tweezing out the stray remaining hairs that she missed with the wax. As she finished, Christina called Maria over to inspect Leo. Christina was satisfied with herself. She looked down at Leo and then at Maria and said, "I think you'll both be satisfied, since I doubt anyone would think that he would ever be called manly looking right now." Maria nodded. Leo blushed as his eyes darted down and stared at the two women's shoes. Maria and Christina walked out into the main room where Maria paid the bill. Christina then walked back in and removed the cape to Leo's horror. Leo's manhood was still swelled by the feminized visage in the mirror. Leo caught Christina holding in a laugh as she shook out the smock. Leo blushed as he stood and tried to situate it in his pants as best he could to hide himself. Maria beckoned him through the door leading to the main area of the salon. Leo moved towards her. He did not want to move towards her, but he felt an odd compulsion to not disobey her. Although their roles were not to be reversed until the following day, Leo already felt that she was unambiguously in charge. Leo shook as he reached the doorway of the room filled with women. Leo hurried through the room and out the door. He was relieved that no one seemed to notice or care how he looked. Leo entered his BMW and Maria entered not more than a second later. Leo drove them back to his home. That night Maria made him dinner for what would be the last time for 14 weeks and perhaps ever. Leo took it in as the last waking hours of being the master of his domain were passing on. They each headed for bed early that night since they were getting up at 5 the next morning to make the long drive. As Leo lay in the bed in master bedroom, he thought about what awaited him. 14 weeks as a feminized servant. 14 weeks of no control. 14 weeks to live his dream. The next morning, Leo and Maria awoke and had a quick breakfast. Leo redressed as Maria insisted with a pair of nude pantyhose beneath his jeans before they packed the two vehicles they would be taking. Leo's BMW was loaded up with Maria's bags, while Maria's early 1990s minivan was filled with Leo's belongings. Leo went to step into his car, but Maria stopped him. She said to him, "Do you think it would look right for the servant to be driving the nice car?" Leo nodded his head in agreement. He surrendered his keys. For 14 weeks, the Beamer was hers. His mode of transportation was going to be her minivan. Leo took the downgrade in with the similar sexual thrill that had accompanied his other decisions to move himself temporarily down the social ladder. As Leo gazed at the vehicle's various dents and faded paint and chipped glass, he realized that the car was perfect for him. He only hoped that it would make the drive without breaking down. The van made a loud sound as he started it. He pulled the vehicle out of the driveway. Maria pulled out of the driveway and got in front of him by illegally passing him. Leo knew that she was making clear that she was the leader, even on the trip. As Leo made the long trip alone, he listened to the radio and thought about how he must seem to those in the other cars on the highway that might notice him. Who would dare believe that he was self-made millionaire as he made his way down the highway in such a dilapidated minivan? Leo began to take pride in every defect in the vehicle. Those defects aroused him. He knew why. Men of his status do not drive vehicles like that, and he knew it. Men of his status usually opt for luxury, but he was not one of them. As he occasionally glanced in the mirror and saw the thin eyebrows above his eyes and the long hair framing his thin face, Leo wondered if he was even really man. He wondered if a real man would ever want to be a woman or even look like one. Would a real man want to be treated as a servant girl? The thoughts made Leo's manhood strain against the gusset of his pantyhose, the feeling of which only resulted in him becoming even more aroused. It was no use to wonder, Leo concluded. It was who he was, and he was unsure if he had ever thought as a normal man did. All Leo knew for sure was that everything about his present surroundings aroused him. The stained carpet and faded dashboard gave him a feeling of being surrounded by working-class surroundings. As did the seats, which had dirt almost embedded within the fabric. The car did not smell dirty though. It smelled like Maria. The scent of her cheap, flowery perfume she always wore seemed to be ingrained in the car. The smell always drove Leo's passions, and now it surrounded him for hours. Several hours later they reached West Egg. Maria used the GPS in the BMW to find the realtor's office, and Leo followed behind her. Leo parked the van behind the pristine BMW and waited for Maria to emerge. She emerged 10 minutes later with the keys in her hand. She shook them at Leo before she re-entered what was now her car. Leo followed Maria towards the home they had rented. They pulled into the wraparound driveway. Maria parked in front of the door and got out of her car. She tried the keys and found which one opened the bottom lock. She opened the door while Leo opened the minivan's back door. Leo and Maria carried their bags into the home, making 2 trips apiece. Their bags rested next to each other as they both entered from the second trip to their vehicles, but they were bound for different places. Maria carried her bags and ascended the stairs of the building towards the master bedroom, while Leo descended the steps into the basement maid's quarters. Leo opened the door to the right of the foot of the steps and looked in. The room was almost completely dark, except for a dim light entering through the small basement windows. Leo entered the room and looked for a light switch by the door. He turned it and turned to look at what was to be his living space for the next 14 weeks. He took it in and slowly looked around the room. The room was sparsely decorated with a dresser and a single bed that seemed to him to be nothing more than a glorified cot. The dresser held up a 12-inch television that looked like it dated from the 1980s. The room had a feeling of dampness to it, and some mold was present around where the yellow walls met the faded asbestos tiles that comprised the floor. There were stains of the ceiling that probably resulted from dripping pipes buried within the rafters. Leo placed his suitcase on the bed. He unpacked his undergarments into the dresser and hung his uniforms and aprons in the room's small closet. He then placed his shoes on the floor in the closet and headed for the quarters door. He turned back when he realized that he was attempting to leave the quarters still dressed in his male clothing. He stripped himself down to his pantyhose and headed towards the closet. He selected the gray uniform and the white soft-soled shoes Maria had picked out for him. He stepped into the dress and finished it off with a white apron he took from the closet as well. He sat on the bed and placed his shoes on. He headed up towards the home's first floor. He looked around as he exited the basement. The 2 rooms in view were the dining room and the great room of the home. They were both spacious and well kept. Although he paid for them, Leo knew that he would never use them. He was only to be a tool to keep up their maintenance. He grabbed the rest of his bags and unpacked in his quarters before he re-entered the downstairs again. Leo walked towards the stairs leading to the second floor and called up, "Maria, do you need my help?" "Yes," was all she replied. Leo walked up the stairs and went to where he heard her voice. Leo entered the master bedroom and stared at Maria, who was closing an ornate dresser drawer. Leo stared around the vast bedroom. There was not a speck of dust on anything. The floors were mahogany wood and covered by highly intricate area rugs. The ceilings were vaulted and framed by crown molding. An antique armoire rested along a wall next to a statue of a regal Venus. Leo turned and stared at the 42 6-inch flat-screen television that rested on the wall across from the bed where Maria's suitcases sat. Maria called over to Leo, "Unpack the rest of my things into the closet on the right and come down and meet me in the foyer." Leo nodded and got to work. He threw open the 2 doors on the right and stared into the massive walk-in closet. It was almost the size of the maid's quarters. The comparison of his quarters to Maria's in his mind made Leo feel all the more excited over his new station in life. Leo's manhood strained against the gusset of his pantyhose as he scurried back and forth from the suitcases to the closet to hang her various shirts, pants, skirts, and dresses. He placed her shoes onto the holders that were built into the closet's walls. As he finished, he closed the closet's 2 heavy wood doors. He then placed her suitcases under the king-size bed on which she would sleep as he would rest his head on a damp single bed. Leo got off his knees and straightened out his apron as he stood. He looked over and caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror on top of the dresser. He took himself in. Long hair tied up, gray maid's uniform, white apron, hairless arms and legs that were covered by nude pantyhose and ended in plain white shoes. He looked every bit the part of a lowly house servant. His boyish unmade-up face even gave him the appearance of at least a transsexual, but maybe even that of an unattractive woman. Either way, he was sure that no one would treat him like a rich, successful man. No, he was sure that he would finally be treated like domestic he always wanted to be. Leo pulled himself away from the mirror and headed down the stairs. As he nearly reached the foot of the steps, he caught sight of Maria. She looked at him impatiently as if he had made her wait an unsatisfactorily long period of time. Leo cast his head down, but Maria did not scold him. She instead said, "Follow me to the kitchen." Leo followed her. The kitchen was fairly small compared to the rest of the home. It was clearly a servant's kitchen built for utility and not for looks, and situated out of the view of most of the living space on the ground floor. There was a small table with 2 stools next to it along the wall across from the stove, sink and fridge. Maria motioned to Leo to sit. He sat and looked her in the eyes. She smiled for a second before her face and voice were stern as she said, "It's time for some ground rules." Leo nodded. He was excited to hear his employer's demands. Maria declared, "From now on I'm Madam." "Is that clear?" "Yes." "Yes, what?" Maria asked for clarification. "Yes, Madam." "I hate to do that to you, Leo, seeing as you've been so nice to me over the years, but I think it's more to your desires anyway." Leo blushed and put his head down. He felt as if Maria knew every dark secret he thought he had kept hidden. Maria smiled at the blushing maid before her and said, "You're to rise at 6 and retire to your quarters at 10 to start with, unless I order otherwise." "Is that understood?" "Yes, Madam." "Good girl," Maria replied. Her reply made Leo already stiffened manhood almost surge forward. Maria read the embarrassing pleasure on Leo's face and continued, "I will not be calling you Leo any longer. The name obviously doesn't fit a maid. Instead, I will be calling you the name of a maid I once knew, Hannah." Leo smiled at the sound of his new, decidedly feminine name. "Now, Hannah, we're going shopping at the local grocery store. It's the only time I will be going with you, so I need you to get down everything I'm going to tell you today." "Yes, Madam." "Well then come along, Hannah." "We'll be taking the BMW," Maria answered. "Would you like me to drive, Madam?" "A domestic behind the wheel of such a fine car? I think not," Maria said in a huff. The dismissive reply greatly aroused Leo. Leo confidently followed her towards the door before he remembered what he was wearing as he saw the sunlight before him. He hesitated before stepping into the doorway. He did not want to step out the door. Maria looked back at him and said, "Come on, Hannah. This is what you wanted. You've got to go through with this." Leo swallowed hard and complied with Maria's statement. It was what a maid would do, he was sure. He sat in the passenger seat with unease as she pulled out of the driveway. As she drove down the road in the car he used to pull into his executive parking spot with, Leo for the first time started to question what he was doing. I must be crazy. I'm not allowed to drive my own car. A car I worked hard for. I'm a passenger in my own car, and I like it. How can this be? How did I get like this? And what if someone I know vacations here and sees me dressed like some servant? I'd practically die in their sight, Leo thought as his manhood swelled while his feelings of manliness reached an all-time low. Maria looked at him and asked, "What's wrong?" Leo shook his head. "Tell me, Hannah," she demanded. Leo felt as if he could not refuse her demands. He answered, "I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "Getting seen by someone I know." "That's not likely." "I know, but still." "Oh, Hannah, if you ever want to be a good maid you're going to have to get over being embarrassed." I know. You're going to be doing things that most men would consider an affront to their manhood, but you're not like them." Leo smiled a little, knowing what she said was true and turning him on. Maria continued, "You're going to be scrubbing, mopping, cleaning, laundering, shopping for a woman and serving her, and all while dressed as a domestic. It's not surprising that you feel it's embarrassing. It would be embarrassing for anyone conditioned to think they were a man, as society defines the term." Maria's litany of all the acts he would perform that would be demeaning to his male identity threw Leo into a lustful tizzy. His embarrassment ceased. Instead he felt as if his body craved the humiliation he was going to receive over the following 14 weeks. 14 weeks at the bottom of the social ladder. 14 weeks as a housemaid. A rich man with the chance to be a lowly servant, and he could not be happier for it. Maria pulled into the parking lot of a grocery store they had passed on their way into the town. Leo followed Maria into the store and grabbed a shopping cart and followed closely behind her. Maria showed him how to purchase fruit and vegetables that were properly ripe. She told him what items he was to get every time he would go to the store. Leo kept careful track of everything she said. He also kept track of every look he got. He almost went unnoticed. Practically no one looked at him or acknowledged him as he moved about in his uniform. The uniform seemed to give him almost a cloak of invincibility. After all, Leo figured, who would be concerned with such a lowly worker? However, there were 3 people in the store that did notice him. One man gave him an odd look and quickly looked away. Leo was sure that he had figured out that Leo was not the woman he was dressed as. It was the others that Leo knew had read him. A 20-something-year-old girl looked to her friend and said within Leo's earshot, "Look at the fag." Leo's face turned red as he caught the woman's friend staring at him before turning away quickly. The put-down both stung and aroused Leo. It seemed to Leo that the deeper his humiliation, the greater his arousal would be. He almost wanted to flaunt his look to those girls, but decided against it. Leo and Maria finished shopping and headed towards the registers. Leo squirmed on the line. He was closer to others than he was anywhere else since he started dressing as Maria's housemaid. Not one of the customers behind him gave him a strange look. The cashier seemed to ignore him. She did not make eye contact with him and was very curt. It seemed as if he was not worth her time. Leo loved the feeling that gave him. Maria paid the cashier and led Leo towards the front of the building. Leo followed behind her pushing the cart. Leo and Maria headed out of the building, packed up the car and went home. Maria helped Leo carry in the packages and put away the goods. Shortly after they finished, Maria began her instruction to her willing student. Leo watched as she scoured the bathroom floor with a handheld brush. He took it from her with his rubber-gloved hands and followed her lead. Maria watched him closely as he cleaned the floor. She gauged his movements. Leo squirmed beneath her gaze. He fought hard against his arousal, trying to convince himself it was just work and that it should not produce a sexual thrill in him. When she was convinced he had grasped it, Maria told him to abandon it for the moment. Leo looked up at her from his knees with his hands before his body. Maria told him to follow her. Leo walked behind her and followed her into the kitchen. He watched as cleaned the wood floors of the dining room by hand. Leo cut in as soon as he could and took over for Maria. She seemed reluctant to turn over the cleaner, but she collected herself and stood over him as he cleaned. She barked orders at him when his technique failed to produce results that met her standards. Leo blushed at every scold she offered. He would hastily try to comply with her orders. The embarrassment that ripped through him made him almost want to make more mistakes just to hear the curt words of his employer, but he knew that a good maid would never do such a thing. When she was satisfied with how he performed, Maria addressed him. "Hannah," she said, "I believe you won't need instruction on scouring a toilet with a toilet brush or how to vacuum or dust. Am I right in my belief?" "Yes, madam," Leo replied from his knees. "Good, then I shall teach you windows next." Maria took a bottle of Windex that she had left on the counter and a page of newspaper and led Leo towards the front windows. Leo watched as she left a streak-free shine on the window. Leo then gave it his try. He performed it, but it was not to her satisfaction. Maria tried to take the paper from his hand to do it herself, but Leo begged for a second chance. He desperately wanted to please her. Maria knew it too. She hesitated before she reluctantly permitted it. Maria found Leo's second attempt satisfactory. Leo felt sheer delight at her approval. Leo continued to work on the windows as Maria left him and entered the kitchen. He heard her pushing some things around before she called him into the kitchen. Leo entered the kitchen and stared at her. He anxiously awaited her next command. The arousal she had caused him in with her every demeaning order brought him pleasure he had never experienced before. Maria held out a manila folder in her outstretched hand. Leo took it from her and listened as she said, "I can't teach you how to cook everything you will be cooking for me over the following weeks, but if you follow the recipes you should be fine." Leo nodded and placed the folder down on the counter. Maria paused for a second before she said, "Now, maid, I want you to cook me the recipe on page 2 for lunch. After serving me, you're to do the various tasks I showed you how to perform. Is that understood?" "Yes, madam," Leo replied dutifully. Leo methodically followed her recipe. He made it to the exact specifications. He served it to Maria. She took a bite and stared at Leo. She smiled and said, "It is acceptable." Leo grinned and put his head down as she continued to eat, and he awaited her further command. None were uttered. Maria left the dining room and Leo cleaned off the table. He washed the dishes by hand even though there was a dishwasher because he wanted to be sure nothing would remain stuck to the plates and glasses he would serve Maria with. He was struck by her words as he cleaned. It was acceptable. Those words haunted Leo. Adequacy sufficed for a first try, but Leo was determined to be good by Maria's standards. It seemed to Leo that the only thing that mattered to him anymore was her approval. Maria left for the afternoon, but told him that she would be home before dinner. He was saddened to be cleaning without her presence, but he figured that a domestic did not need to be constantly overseen. Leo knew he should merit no special favor because he was new to it. Leo knew that he should also merit no special favor merely because of who he was to the outside world. Leo Munby was someone else as far as Leo was concerned. To him and Maria, the only person he was at the moment was Hannah the maid. Leo spent the rest of his day cleaning the large home. The floors and windows shined clean when he finished. It so satisfied Maria that she complimented Leo. She told him that he was a natural maid. Leo had never felt prouder from a compliment. He was a natural at the only thing he ever wanted to be. For Leo, it could not seem to get any better. Leo's cleaning was broken up by having to cook and serve Maria dinner. He made the meal she requested and again Maria found it sufficient. Leo vacuumed the upstairs after dinner before Maria headed to bed early that night to rest after the long trip. Leo still had hours of work ahead of him as he dusted every item on the first floor of the house before he was able to turn in for the night. As Leo dusted the various items and furniture, he could not help but think of what had happened to him. Leo the CEO was now Hannah the maid. From the top of the top to the bottom of the bottom, he had gone so far in a few short weeks. As he thought about how he was working as a domestic in a home while his employer slept, Leo realized he felt like he was where he belonged for the first time in his adult life. Leo showered before he went to sleep. The water seemed to not be capable of getting fully hot. It was not a big deal for Leo. He could not care less if the shower was completely cold. Nothing was ruining what had become of him. Leo situated himself in the bed after he finished drying himself off and dressing in a nightgown Maria had snuck into his bags. The dampness of his musty surroundings aroused him momentarily as he stared around from his bed, but weariness accompanied his hard day's labor. So soon after he hit the mattress, Leo was fast asleep. Upon waking to his alarm, Leo rose and dressed himself for a hard day's labor in the home. He slipped on his bra and tights. He tucked himself away and put on breast forms before he put on the gray housekeeper's uniform. He then went to the main floor and started making Maria her breakfast. She came down and ate it at her leisure while he waited on her to finish. When she did finish, and after finished cleaning, Leo ate his own breakfast. As he finished, Maria told him that she was going out for a little while and would be back at lunchtime. He wished her a good time as she exited. After Maria left, Leo spent the morning cleaning up all that was left over from the night before. Around 2 p.m. he heard the front door open as he relaxed because she was not home and nothing was left in the home to clean. "Maria, is that you?" Leo called out to make sure she was there. "Hannah, where are you?" "I'm just finishing up in the living room," Leo lied as he got to his feet and approached her voice. She met him halfway and said, "Hannah, I've got a surprise for you." "What is it?" Leo asked. "I've got you a job." "A job?" Leo replied, deflated. "Yes." "But why, madam?" "Simple. There's not enough for you do around here all day long. It's the same reason I was able to work a second job when I was Mr. Munby's employee." Leo nodded. He was excited to hear her divorce his luxurious past from his servile present. However, he was concerned at the exposure. "I can't do that, madam. I'd die being exposed like that," he exclaimed. "Nonsense, Hannah. It's nothing to get troubled over. You've gone out before in full dress. No one knows who you are here, so why should you care what these strangers think?" "I guess I could try." "You have no choice," Maria exclaimed, pointedly. Her demanding tone excited Leo further. Leo nodded and said, "You're right, madam. I'm sorry for being out of line. I know my place." "Good girl." Leo smiled slightly at her response before asking, "When will I start?" "Tonight." "Tonight?" Leo exclaimed. "Yes." "Well, where I'm working?" Leo asked as concern gripped him again. "This little fast food place I found. They don't ask for documentation. It looks like practically every employee there is not here legally. They were happy to just get another English-speaking worker to work for minimum wage." Leo was overcome by fears of being scrutinized by strangers, but also arousal at their disapproval of him. He had started his work life at a fast food restaurant and 25 years later he was returning, except this time he was not going to be one of the guys. Maria then dismissed Leo and told him to make her lunch. He complied with her orders and waited for her to finish before he made his own. When he finished eating, Maria called for him to enter the great room. Leo found her sitting on the couch with a bag in her hand. He looked at her and she said, "I come bearing gifts." Leo walked over to her and peered into the bag. It was just clothes and shoebox. "What is this?" Leo asked. "It's your uniform top and some pants and shoes I bought you. Go try them on." Leo took the bag from her hand and complied with her order. He entered her bathroom and stripped down to his tights. He stepped into one of the pairs of plain black pants and slipped his feet into the plain, flat, black shoes. He picked up one of the three tops and found a visor and hairnet and apron within its folds. He put on the red and yellow collared shirt and placed his long hair within the hairnet and then placed the visor on. He slipped the black apron over his neck last and tied its strands behind his back. Leo moved towards the door, but stopped to check his appearance in the bathroom mirror. In his best summation, he looked at best like a dowdy middle-aged woman. He wondered if he should put on a little makeup. He looked at the person in the mirror. A woman dressed for menial labor among the undocumented. Even serving Maria had not made him feel as lowly as looking in the mirror did at that moment. He felt as if he was almost going to burst through his tights with excitement at his degraded position in life. He exited the bathroom with his head down low and moved towards the great room to be judged by Maria. He stood before her. A grin slowly emerged on her face. Leo could barely manage the courage to look at her face. She seemed to delight in his embarrassment. She then said, "I was afraid that you were going to stand out like a sore thumb, but I was wrong. You look no different from the girls I saw there today." Leo nodded slowly as he gazed at the floor. Maria then dictated him directions to his new job. She told him his first shift would begin in 2 hours, but it was only a 10-minute car ride. Leo asked what she was having for dinner, since he would be leaving before dinner time. She politely said he was not required to cook when he went out for the night. She was going to cook for herself. Leo was allowed to make himself a quick meal to eat before he had to go. He ate and headed into his quarters, where he hung up his maid's outfit that he had been wearing before he placed on the uniform. Leo left for his job 30 minutes before his shift was scheduled to begin. He was determined to be early. He drove down to the building and parked outside of it. He waited for 10 minutes before he decided to go in. He walked towards the building in measured steps. He looked at the sign saying "Welcome to Crystal Castle." He wondered if he should turn back and run. He thought that maybe he should just drive home and forget the whole stupid plan he made with Maria to live out his fantasy, but he felt that he could not turn back. It was too late, he figured. It was his dream that she was helping him fulfill. He could not back out on her now. He drew open the door and stepped inside. He saw a few people's eyes meet him and then drift away. No one seemed to notice that he was any different from the girls behind the counter. He approached the counter and a supervisor waved him towards the locked door that separated the customers from the kitchen. He was allowed back into the kitchen by the supervisor. The supervisor sized him up with a knowing smile upon her face. She identified herself as Mary Colwick. She was in her 20s, had blonde hair and was slightly overweight. Mary left him for a moment to get his name tag. Leo looked around the kitchen as he waited. The stainless steel appliances seemed clean for their usage. Mary walked over and gave Leo a name tag reading, Hannah. Mary directed Leo towards the broiler and told him how the machine operated. Leo listened intently to her instructions before he went to work at the broiler. As he got to work in the kitchen, the other co-workers chatted in Spanish. Since he was not fluent in the language, Leo was out of the loop. He could feel them looking at him from time to time though. Leo knew that they knew that he was not born a woman. He did not know if they thought he was transsexual or a transvestite, but from their looks he knew that they found him odd. Leo was content, however, to work the broiler as the smell of hamburgers wafted into his nose. Leo felt excited doing it because he was surrounded by others. He could not help his excitement. He was working along those at the bottom of society. He was working in full view of the customers who could see right into the kitchen. Those customers would probably think that Leo was just another worker without a green card. It made him feel better than he had at any time in his adult life. He was on display to the world as a cross-dresser that night, and there was no hiding himself. Leo stayed on the broiler until a man relieved him, and he was ordered by Mary to clean the bathrooms. Leo took the mop and bucket out from the closet as he was directed and headed towards the bathrooms with a sour expression on his face that he wore to hide his inner pleasure. As he got to mopping and scrubbing the men's room floor and toilets, Leo could not help but smile. His manhood surged forth with every push of the mop and scour of the public toilet. The pleasure of his manhood struggle against his hosiery was Leo's only reminder that he was recently the lord of his domain. Leo exited the bathroom and set about cleaning the women's bathroom next. As he finished putting away the materials to get back to work in the kitchen, Leo saw Mary staring into space. He approached her and asked, "What's wrong?" "Oh, nothing, Hannah. I was just thinking to myself, anything good?" "No." "Well, hope you have better thoughts later," Leo said as he moved back towards the grill. Mary waved her hand dismissively at him. Leo headed back towards the broiler and took over for the man that had replaced him. Leo completed his shift around 11 that night and headed home. As he drove, Leo realized he had the smell of the fast food ingrained in his uniform. He opened the windows of the van, but he could not escape the smell. As he parked the car and stepped out in front of the home, the smell was still surrounding him. As he opened the door to house, Leo heard Maria calling his name from the master bedroom. He ascended the steps towards her and knocked on her door. She allowed him to enter. "Oh, I can smell you from here, Hannah," she declared as she wafted her hand in front of her face. Leo stared at her as she rested comfortably beneath the covers on the bed. The television was on, and she appeared to be watching the news. Maria's eyes darted away from him towards the television for a moment before she looked back and demanded, "The toilet is clogged in the bathroom over there. I need you to unclog it." Leo nodded and headed into the master bathroom. He searched for a plunger and found one in the bathroom closet. He plunged the clog out of the toilet as he heard the sounds of laughing voices on the television. After testing the toilet, he put the plunger away. Leo paused in the doorway of the bathroom on his way out. He gazed around the well-kept and spacious master bedroom. The king-sized bed on which Maria rested felt soft when he made it. Not long ago he was the resident of the master suite. Now, he was a servant, smelling of cheap food and about to descend 2 staircases to his cramped living quarters. The change aroused him as much as the fantasy to do so had for reasons he did not understand. Leo exited the bedroom and headed for his quarters. He showered in the bathroom in the maid's quarters. He had intended to take a short one, but he could not seem to get the smell of fast food off his skin that quickly. After 30 minutes, it was gone to his satisfaction and he dried himself off and headed for bed. As Leo lay in bed, he could continually smell the scent of the fast food that surrounded him for hours before. Leo smelled himself, but did not smell it on any part of his body. He wondered if it was ingrained in his nostrils. Eventually, he was able to put it out of mind enough to drift to sleep. Upon waking the next morning, Leo dressed himself in his black maid's uniform. He decided to apply makeup to his face and then set about making Maria's breakfast. After he finished cleaning up once she had finished her meal, Leo set about cleaning the home again. He scrubbed the kitchen as Maria instructed her to do. The room was virtually spotless when he finished. Then he cleaned the bathroom for the second time in 3 days. As he finished with it, Maria popped her head in and said, "I need you to go to the general store for me. I need tampons for light flow days and pads for the heavier flow." "Okay?" Leo replied, "Of course, madam." Leo removed his apron. He straightened out his uniform and checked his appearance in the mirror. Satisfied that his makeup had withstood the day of labor, he headed down to his quarters. He grabbed his pocketbook and headed out to the minivan. He drove to the store and perused its items. Leo was relieved that no one seemed to notice him. He felt as if the uniform he wore somehow made him invisible to most people. However, those were people he did not know. Not Stephen Johnson, his former vice president. Leo turned away from where he saw Stephen and hurried into an aisle. What the hell is he doing here? Leo thought to himself. Leo felt a real surge of fear run through him. He did not want to be found out by people he knew. That's why he had gone so far away to do what he was doing. As Leo peered back into the aisle, he saw Stephen walking towards his general direction. Leo started down the aisle. His panicked mind wondered if Maria had set this up. Maybe this is payback for letting her go, Leo wondered. Leo stared away from Stephen with his trembling hands before him. Leo heard footsteps moving closer to him. He felt a hand upon his shoulders. Leo shuddered as he got up the courage to turn and face Stephen. However, he was proven wrong. Stephen had turned down a different aisle. Leo turned and looked at the man standing next to him. It was the manager. "Excuse me, miss, but I saw you drop this," the manager said. Leo took the small key that had fallen from his pocketbook. He thanked the manager in a broken English-Spanish accent he was trying to perfect for when he was spoken to by strangers. He figured it was more probable that they would not pick up on the male qualities of his voice if he did it with an accent to throw them off. Leo then turned away from the manger and watched from his aisle as Stephen picked up an item and brought it to the cashier. Leo took quick glances of Stephen from afar as Stephen paid for his items and left. Leo greeted Stephen's departure with immediate relief. Leo approached the cashiers with the pads and tampons in his hand. It did not feel strange to Leo to be holding them. He knew that men would take affront to it, but he did not see the big deal. Leo looked out the window as the cashier rung up the goods. Leo watched intently as he saw Stephen's car moving, but it left the parking lot to his relief. With the potential exposure gone, Leo felt a wave of relief wash over him. He paid for the pads and tampons and hurried back to his car. He hurried home because he still had work to do before he was scheduled to go back to work at the Crystal Castle that night. He reached home and cleaned up the master bedroom by making the bed and dusting the various items in it. He made Maria lunch and ate lunch himself right after. He then got back to cleaning the various rooms of the large house. A little less than an hour before he had to leave, he got into his Crystal's Castle uniform and checked his makeup and hair. Satisfied with how he looked, he took his time to give a quick dusting to the dining room before he left for another night at the Crystal's Castle. The night at work was much like the day before. The fellow employees continued to give him awkward glances, but did not say anything to his face. His supervisors ignored him as just another worker in the kitchen when they were not giving him orders. Leo fought against his arousal, which accompanied his every thought comparing his situation to his situation 3 weeks earlier. He smiled as he thought about life as Leo. Then, he would have been hounded by questions by his employees and spoken to in polite respect. Now, he was spoken down to when he was spoken to at all. The only words that others had for him seemed to be orders. He was no longer the go-to guy, but the lowest-ranked servant. For Leo, the weeks of servitude seemed to fly by. He enjoyed it more than he thought he would. As the last day of the rental came, Maria approached him and said, "One last day, Hannah." "What? We've only got 1 day left here, then it's back to Mr. Munby's home." "Really, madam?" Leo asked, surprised because he had lost track of time. "Yes. But what about my job? They know that yesterday was your last shift. I told them you were seasonal when they employed you." Leo was upset because his bosses had not spoken a word of it to him and had not even said goodbye to him. Maria read the unpleasant look on Leo's face and asked, "Are you upset by this?" "No, madam," Leo said in a half-truth. It was not making him upset at the moment, but he did not want to leave his new life. Leo continued, "I'm excited to be going back to it." Maria grinned and said, "Well, that's nice, but remember today you're still my maid. Although, I hope you've gotten your fill out of it." Leo nodded with a slight smile, trying to disguise that he badly wished to be a maid every day. However, he had friends and family he could not desert forever. He knew that being a maid in West Egg forever was just not in the cards for him. Maria dismissed him and he set to packing away her things. He left her one outfit for the following morning. Leo packed his own belongings after that. He folded away each uniform with a hint of sadness. While he knew he would wear them again, he was sure that it would be for a fictional master, not his mistress Maria. He carried the bags into the foyer and carried down Maria's bags there as well. He made dinner for them for the last night. Maria again dined alone in the dining room, while he ate standing in the kitchen. He relished it and almost did not want to turn in that night, but weariness overcame him. He headed down to the maid's quarter for the last time. The musty, cramped quarters that had been his home for 14 weeks would be a memory by the following afternoon. He soaked in the room. Tomorrow night he would be in the master bedroom again, but for one last night he was where he felt he belonged. The next morning, they dressed, packed the vehicles and went and turned the keys over to the realtor. They then made the long trip back to Leo's home with Maria getting one last drive of the BMW and Leo close behind her in the minivan. They swapped cars at a pit stop about an hour away from Leo's home. Leo stepped through the driver's side door of the BMW for the first time in 14 weeks. The luxury vehicle was in stark contrast to the minivan he had been driving. The Beamer suited Leo Munby, but the minivan suited Hannah. Leo looked in the mirror and saw Leo staring back at him, but felt that it was Hannah who really embodied him. Leo felt uncomfortable behind the wheel as he drove the final miles home. When they reached his home, they brought their bags inside. Maria brought her belongings down into the maid's quarters and Leo carried his to the master bedroom. He unpacked his belongings there. When he finished, he hurried out of the room as if he was only supposed to be there to accomplish tasks. Leo saw dust on the counter. He instinctively went for the cleaner, but Maria was there. He knew she should get it. They needed to go out and get food to replenish the pantry and the fridge, but Maria told him that she was going to do it. Leo walked into the living room and turned on his large-screen television. He sat on the couch, but felt uneasy. It was his couch, but it did not feel that way to Leo. He felt as if his master would come in and scold him any moment for being a lazy maid on the master's couch. Leo's discomfort did not lessen as the day wore on. Leo lounged, but tapped his feet wildly as Maria set about cleaning the house. Maria made dinner and set it at the dining room table for Leo. Leo watched as Maria exited the room as she always did in his home to eat separately in the kitchen. That should be me, Leo thought to himself as he took his fork to the food on his plate. When Leo finished, Maria came in, her uniform reaching just past her knee as usual. She cleared the table and set to cleaning up after Leo. Leo headed to bed early that night. He could not bear to feel any more discomfort trying to feel at home in the main floor of his own home. Leo laid down on his bed and tried to go to sleep, but he could not. Something felt wrong about it. He stared around the bedroom from his bed. It felt as he remembered, but he did not. He felt as if the room belonged to Leo Munby, but he had ceased to be him. He was Hannah the maid, not Leo the master. He remembered Leo, remembered being him, but he seemed detached from the person he felt he was. Leo was the masquerade all those years, but Hannah was who he truly was. He pulled himself out of bed. He hurried down the steps and then hurried down another flight to the maid's quarters. He rapped upon Maria's door. Maria opened the door and asked, "What can I do for you, Leo?" "I can't do this." "Can't do what?" she asked as she moved him towards her bed and sat beside him. "I can't sleep in the master bedroom. I can't let you clean while I lounge around. I can't let you shop for me. I'm not a master. I know it's only until you get another job, but I can't." "Calm down, Leo. I'm sorry. You just don't understand." "I understand completely, Leo. You need to serve." "Yes. I understand, Leo. The high life is not for everyone. Maybe it's not for." "It's not. It's not. I swear it. I belong here. I know you can't understand." "Oh, but I do. How could you possibly?" "I've never told you this, Leo, but I was married once." "I never knew." "I know I just told you I never told you. Anyway, I lived thousands of miles away then. What happened? We were wrong for each other. We were both born to wealthy families, but he ruled our marriage with an iron fist. So you divorced? Not at first. I liked to serve him, but he became abusive. I divorced him and took a good deal of his money to keep quiet about the hitting on top of what I already had. This isn't adding up to me, Leo said, genuinely confused as to how Maria ended up with him. Leo, I always felt the need to serve. The doctors my mother took me to told me I was a masochist and a misophile. My parents couldn't understand me. I may have born with a silver spoon in my hand, but I only wanted to polish it. Please, don't interrupt. I thought the man I married understood my urges. He did. He just thought too little of me. I ceased to be human in his eyes, I believe. After I divorced him, I could have lived forever on my fortune. I never had to work, but I wanted to. I also wanted to get away from my family, especially after my father died and left me with no buffer from my mother's constant criticism of my choices. Maria then paused before continuing. I tell you that once she even got me fired when she found out that I was working as a hotel maid, because she said I was disgracing the family name by doing such menial work. It was menial to her, but it's work that has to get done. Damn right, Leo interrupted, ecstatically. Maria smiled and continued, well, anyway, I got my first name legally changed to Maria about 12 years ago and moved far away from them. I go back and see them 2 times a year when I tell you that I'm going to see my family. Of course, when they see me they ask what I do, where I've been, and I lie to them. I tell them that I travel the world when I really never go more than 25 miles from here. They wouldn't understand the truth, they never did. I don't think they really could. I know that you know. I knew that the minute I was sent by the company that referred me to you. When I first saw you, I saw that look you gave the uniform. The same look I gave it when I saw a woman in it. I had worked in others' homes before you, but you were the first to give the uniform that look. I knew if I was ever going to get a fair master it would be you, so I worked hard to impress you. You did. Thank you. I knew that one day I would be sent away by you so that you could take over around here. I was hoping that I could buy a little more time here by hopefully getting it out of your system, but I knew by the second week that it was not going to happen. You could tell. I could and did. All I ask for is a little time to rent a place for myself. I don't need your money. The agency will place me somewhere else eventually. It's been a real pleasure, Leo. I just want you to know that. I guess you were such a good master because you were a maid at heart. You don't have to leave. Leo, this home is soon to have no master. It will be your task to keep this house clean and running. I'd have no place here. Maybe we could take turns being the master during the day, then we could both sleep down here, Leo said. I have no interest in being the mistress of this home, and I'm sorry to say if you were getting your hopes up, I have no interest in you physically. I'm not attracted to women. Leo felt crushed by her seemingly made-up mind to leave. Leo understood how she viewed him, because he viewed himself the same way. Leo then blurted out, what if you stayed as the top maid? The what? Maria asked with a genuine confused look on her face. The main maid. You could be my superior. You've got more time in the position than me. You could delegate some jobs to me. Maria stood up and contemplated it. Leo continued, when I have company you can be the servant alone. I'll play the man. I'll have people over more often if you would like. Maria rubbed her chin. Leo then added, when you go see your family. I'll go with you if you like. I can play your boyfriend or husband or whatever. Maria smiled and said softly, that would get my mother off my back about that. Please, Leo said in a near plead. Get in my bed, Hannah. What? Leo asked. Get in bed and face the wall. You can sleep with me tonight, but tomorrow we're going to get you your own bed. We can squeeze another single bed down here for you. It'd be nice to have some companionship. Leo's eyes alighted as Maria shooed him into the bed. Leo slipped under the covers and faced the wall. Maria turned off the light and slipped in beside him. There they drifted asleep as two domestics living exactly as they wanted.